Thank you, Megan, and good afternoon, AMSA. Thank you for having me back. As Megan said, it's been 15 years since I convened AMSA convention, and a lot's happened over that time. The AMSA committee has invited me to speak to you a little bit about my life's journey over the last 15 years, and the highs and lows that have shaped me into the doctor that I am today, and just to encourage you and inspire you in your medical journey. From medical school and what you aspire to be in medicine and as a person. And hopefully after my talk, you're more passionate and inspired to think about the different choices you have in life generally. So I'm just going to run over here and get my clicker. Now, it says Survivor Doc. Obviously, I've done a lot of other things in my life, but one of the things they wanted me to speak to you about is how I was involved in the US TV series of Survivor, and I was the doctor on it for 12 seasons and the medical director of it for 10 of those seasons, and worked on the show for about 6 years. So I'm just going to tell you a bit about my journey to get me there. Now, everyone's life journey is a little bit different. We all have highs and lows that shape us into the person we are. And when I tell you about my journey so far, I don't want to stand up here and say, look at me and look at all the things I've done. All of us have different experiences and opportunities that take us to where we are and where we want us to be. And so I've just put this little quote about it's a constant journey of growing and refining who you are. When you think back as a kid about what you wanted to be, was the thought of life ahead of you a straight path? Did you ever think, I'm going to do this and this and this and this, and it sort of stretched off into the horizon? Or you're a little bit about what you wanted to do or what you wanted to be. So think back to your 4-year-old self, and I want everyone to think in the room, as a 4-year-old, if someone asked you the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? What sort of things did you think about? This was me. So someone asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I said to them I wanted to be Wonder Woman, I wanted to be a doctor, I wanted to be a writer, and I wanted to be an artist. My 4-year-old self was never, I'm going to just do this one thing. I always had a lot of choices in my mind about what I wanted to do, and whether I wanted to do them concurrently or one at a time. I was always encouraged in my life to be a whole lot of things, and I was really supported by my family to think and dream about many things, and I'm glad I had those dreams and those hopes. It was not always what I wanted to be, but who I wanted to be. The what I wanted to be is a very fluid concept. I think you're sometimes this thing or this career or this parent or this person, but the who was never fluid. I always wanted to be a loving person, very caring, compassionate, passionate, adventurous, and I always wanted to make a difference in this world and help people, and that's why my career in medicine was something that I always wanted to do, to follow those aspirations. I grew up in Australia. I was born in Penrith, Western Sydney, and grew up in the Blue Mountains. I had a very loving and supportive family. They encouraged me to be anything I wanted to. Unfortunately, I didn't get into medicine straight out of school, and I ended up at University of Wollongong. Have we got some Wollongong uni people here? Woo! When I was at Wollongong, we didn't have medicine at that time, so I did biomedical science, which was an amazing grounding, and I loved the course there. And I studied really, really hard because I wanted to get high distinctions and move across to medicine. And in that time, I also got involved. I lived in college, on campus, and I got involved as a social convener for the committee there, and I started organising lots of parties. So a little bit like your social conveners. I heard it was a very late night, or should I say early morning today. And so if a few of you are waning, I don't mind. As convening convention back in the year, I remember it was very long nights and very long days, but lots of fun. So I finally got into University of Newcastle Medicine after doing a 4-year degree at Wollongong, and I did my thesis and my honours and things like that. Have we got Uni of Newcastle students here? Yay! It was an awesome course. Now, I did do a whole degree beforehand, and so I could have done a graduate medical program, but I looked at all the programs around at the time, and I loved University of Newcastle Medicine because there weren't a lot of problem-based learning universities at that time. A lot of them were very traditional-based, and I loved the thought of getting out and meeting people from a very young as a first-year med student. I got very involved in med school because I'd done a lot of study in my previous degree. I was a bit slack and didn't do as much study in medicine, and I sort of got involved. So I got involved in the medical society. I was the social convener to start with because that's what I'd done in my previous thing, and then I was the vice president and president. I got involved in rural health clubs because I really loved rural medicine. I did electives in Australia and overseas. And I went for different scholarships. Now, my family was never a rich family, so I worked through uni, and I saved up, and I went travelling or on electives every uni holiday. And I want to encourage you in your university degrees to get involved, because the more you do, and I found the more I did, the more opportunities were placed at me, and I was asked to do different things because of the background that I had. And so the electives and the travel that I did every holidays spurred me on to do more and more things. And with that, there's many, many scholarships out there. Did anyone apply for the John Flynn placement program this year? few people aspiring to be rural doctors. I was one of the 4 markers in Australia for those applications this year. There are 1,000 people, over 1,000 people who applied for that scholarship. I don't know if they've come out yet, but just reading some of the applications was really inspirational. You've got people from all different backgrounds doing medicine now, not just straight from school, and I was really impressed by the maturity of those applications. So get out there. There's lots of different scholarships and bursaries and electives that you can do as a medical student. My personal growth came from travelling and getting to know people in Australia and different communities overseas, and working in very rural and remote places all over Australia and overseas. It increased my medical ability as a doctor, and also I think my worldview. I matured as I travelled and met different people from different cultures and religions and backgrounds, from my sheltered, secure, safe life in the Blue Mountains. And that made me be able to relate to more people. I think to be an amazing and inspirational and brilliant doctor, my 3 things are to be passionate, to be compassionate, and to be competent. So I always had the passion, ever since I was probably 2. Compassion, I was a compassionate person, but I think it grew as I learnt about more and more people around the world, and competency came there over the years by doing more and more study. So electives and travels. In Newcastle Uni, when I went through, we had 2 electives, one at the end of 3rd year and one at the end of 5th year. Is it still the same? Yep, for about 2 months. And before that, I got to go on a scholarship to Chile in South America, and I spent 3 months in different Indigenous communities, a month in each, learning Spanish and working among Indigenous populations, and that was a great eye-opener. And I also then went backpacking through South America with a friend through Bolivia and Peru, and that was an amazing time to be amongst Indigenous people and learn about traditional medicine, different healers, herbal medicines, and all sorts of other things. I then went to Manali in the Himalayas in my 3rd year elective and learnt about access to healthcare and how it's very, very different in many communities around the world. People would travel for a week sometimes across the Himalayas to get to this little hospital that we had up there, and I actually spent 3.5, nearly 4 months there, so 2 months more than my actual elective because I loved it so much. But I learned about obstetrics, I did surgery, I helped with anaesthetics, so I did a lot as a 3rd year medical student, and that made me more competent and capable as I went through med school. I'm just going to go back. After that, in my 4th year, I travelled around Australia and went to different communities in rural Australia. And 5th year, I went back to South America. And my plan was to go back to Macayway, which is in southern Chile, with the Mapuche Indians, and compare their traditional medicine with an Incan society at Ollantaytambo at the base of Machu Picchu, and then go to a Mayan community in the Chiapas in Mexico. And that was my elective, and the university approved it. And off I went. But if you look at all the stuff that I did in medical school when I wasn't studying as much as I should have, and convening AMSA conventions in my 5th year and going to different conventions right before my exams, I got an email when I was halfway through my 5th year elective to say, you didn't quite pass your 5th year medicine exams and you haven't finished medical school and you need to come back now and spend the next 2 months studying and doing your exams again. So that was a little bit of a low in my life. So I went back, I studied my butt off, and I did very well. My professor said I would have graduated with honours had I applied myself the first time. But finally, I became a competent medical student. So I was always passionate, always compassionate, but I became a bit more competent. And I'm so glad that I actually missed out on that elective and did that, because the things I learned in those few months equipped me to be a much better doctor later on. All right, let's get on to junior doctor. I'll go really quickly. So I worked in Tamworth in the hospital there. I always picked rural because I think you learn a lot more in rural hospitals. I'm not bagging out city hospitals by any means, but as a junior doctor in a rural hospital, because there's less people, so there's less senior registrars and big teams of medical or surgical teams going around on those ward rounds, it might be just you and the consultant. You learn a lot more and you're given a lot more responsibility at a young age, or maybe not so young age, but at a junior level, and you get to be mentored one-on-one with consultants. I got into emergency medicine my 3rd year at Tamworth, and I got to work in emergency and anaesthetics and ICU terms, and I got into retrieval, and that was in my 3rd year out. And you also got to do terms like obstetrics and anaesthetics that you might not get a chance to do in city hospitals. So if I put my little plug in for rural medicine right now, I really encourage you to go rural at least sometime in your medical career to get a chance to do that sort of thing. I always wanted to do charities and aid work and NGOs, so I supported a lot of these, and I have for many, many years, and have contacts in all of these sort of agencies. I went with some friends and we went to Zimbabwe and Botswana, and we worked there for a few months in some hospitals, aid hospitals, where there's like 99% AIDS and tuberculosis. Learnt about a lot of that sort of thing. Taught in schools in Zimbabwe, and abandoned baby homes in Botswana, and just had an amazing time in Africa. As I said, I got into emergency medicine, so I did a lot of my training. I did some of my exams, but then another low in my life, and I won't go into it because we don't have time, but basically I got a stalker when I was up in Tamworth, and it got very nasty and very scary, and I had to be walked to hospital with security every day and live in a secure facility, and so basically, long story short, I had to leave Tamworth, which I was very sad about, and I went back home to the mountains for a little while, and then I locumed for a while. I just needed a bit of a break, and one of my friends said, look, let's go overseas and let's do something fun, and so we decided to go and do the Trans-Siberian, Trans-Mongolian Railway. I'd always wanted to go to Mongolia and China and adventure and travel there. So we planned it all, and then the day before we were booking, we'd planned this whole for an October, she rang and cancelled, and I was really, really upset. And I sort of prayed that night, and I said, it was a very selfish prayer. I said, dear God, please let something come up in October that's exciting and fills me with passion and adventure and longing, and maybe to do with medicine again. And the next day I was locating at Nepean Hospital in Penrith, doing emergency medicine, and a friend came up to me and said, what are you doing in October? And I was like, well, nothing. And she goes, how would you like to be the doctor on the US TV series Survivor? And I was like, what? And she said, how would you like to be the doctor? And I was like, how does one even begin to do something like that? And she said, well, there's a medical Australian company that owns a contract, and they asked me to do it. I can't do it. I'm adventure racing in Mongolia. And so they want someone, and they want someone in 6 weeks. And I was like, okay, I'll think about it. 2 minutes later, she's waving to me from the nurse's station. It's like, come in. And she goes, here you go. And she hands me the phone. And right then and there, in the middle of my ED shift, I did a phone interview with the company. 2 days later, I was in Sydney and did a sit-down interview. And 6 weeks later, I was on a plane to Fiji. And that's how I got onto Survivor. So very, very random and an answer to prayer, even though it was a very selfish prayer. And so I ended up doing a couple of months on Survivor Fiji as one of their doctors and learnt all about being a TV medic and all that comes with that. And I'll show you a few more slides about all that comes with that. It was an amazing experience and it sparked my adventure for travel, my passion for rural medicine and rural communities from people from Indigenous backgrounds and also travel. So they asked me, the company liked me and said, look, would you consider taking a year off your emergency training and come and be the doctor on Survivor with us? And I said, yep. And the next year they did another show called Pirate Master in the Caribbean, which was very tough, as you can see. This is me working. So I did my diving certificate in Fiji. I dived in Fiji. I dived in the Caribbean. That was our medical meeting at the end of every day on the back deck, looking at sunsets and eating wine and cheese. So that was amazing, but I became the director of the medical team then, and then went to Survivor China. So there you go, I finally got to go to China, but it was a year later, and worked on Survivor China. But unfortunately, some things went on in the medical company, and morally and ethically, I didn't feel comfortable. So I talked to the production team about it, and I said, I'm really sorry, I love working on Survivor, but I can't do this. And they understood the reasons. And so unfortunately, I left. But as I was leaving, they said, would you consider putting together your own medical company and coming and putting in a tender for Survivor? And I was like, how does one even begin that? It's not something we learn in medical school, how to set up companies, how to do business management, how to do risk management, how to travel overseas and do things, and also working in wilderness and pre-hospital care. I'd done a little bit in retrieval, but not nearly enough. So I went back to Australia, I got into emergency medicine more, and 6 months of every year I worked in emergency medicine in Australia, and then 6 months of every year I travelled, did some other things, and I got into expedition and wilderness medicine. So I did some courses overseas in America and in England, in the UK, and started doing that. I set up my own medical company over 2 years of meeting risk managers and lawyers and accountants and ministries for health and customs and all of it that comes along with it. And I took myself to LA to put in a tender to Survivor. I sat in one of those big boardrooms across a huge table with 3 people at the other end of the room and you sitting down the other end. Got asked questions by Mark Burnett and CBS and Jeff Probst. And a few weeks later, I got the tender to be the medical director of Survivor, and I started my own company and did that for the next 6 years. So I went to Survivor Samoa, lots of medical logistics, like I just said, how to get shipping and customs, meeting ministers for health, getting registrations in other countries, how to ship medicines overseas. I worked along with CareFlight in Australia about different retrieval equipment and things that would work in the mud and the sand in tropical environments, how to keep your different machines from perishing in the sweat and the sand and the mud. So it was all very exciting. I learned a lot about tropical medicine. That's one of my bucket lists, to still do a Masters of Public Health and Tropical Medicine, but in time. How to work on location, so learning about different people that work on set, like grips and best boys and electrics and audio and cameramen and what they all do, and got to work on some amazing locations off the beaten track where tourists don't go, and it was really beautiful work. Sometimes got to get on TV, which was not something I longed to do, to be in front of the camera, especially when you're hot and sweaty and looking less than glamorous. And in conditions where you're rural and remote, you may be 10 hours from definitive care and you've got only so much equipment to deal with some pretty big emergencies and to make decisions in front of cameras that could be televised to millions of people. A couple of times I got subtitled because Americans couldn't understand my Australian accent. Which was quite amusing. Unfortunately, what was not amusing is we got a tsunami in Samoa just at the end of our first year. The crew had just left and there was a very skeleton crew left, and we got involved in the disaster relief there. So hundreds of people died, but we were there at the top end of the island when the tsunami hit the bottom, and so we got involved in disaster relief by just taking all the medical equipment we had left in the country and going to the main hospital, and we worked day and night for about 4 days with no sleep, and Channel 9 News came over and interviewed us about that. So I got to do disaster relief, but not a way that I'd planned to be involved. I got to go to Nicaragua, so all that's travelling in South America and in Spanish-speaking countries got to come in handy, and I got to work with local crew. We also have to deal with a lot of wildlife and envenomations, and we have wildlife experts. Expert Carl Miller, who used to come on Survivor, was actually in the Blue Mountains yesterday, and we caught up for dinner last night. So we were reminiscing about some of the envenomations we had, and we were laughing about the time that I got bitten on the bottom by a scorpion in the middle of a shoot, and we have to be very quiet on the side of the shoot. So I remember sweating and thinking I was going to throw up and bleep my pants at the same time, and having to sit there through the pain and sweat till they rolled cut, and then I ran off and had to get treated. But we had worse envenomations than that. That was just a funny one. Got to be on camera a few more times, got to learn how to talk to media and what to say and not to say, and be a bit more poised and speak about different things that were affecting each country and Indigenous populations there. In amongst all of that, I did a long-distance relationship with my now husband. The year we were in Nicaragua, and I travelled up to New York and Miami a few times. He lived in New York. He was working on Wall Street at the time. He proposed to me after Nicaragua at the top of the Empire State Building, and the next year we were married in Australia. And then we together went back to Survivor. So we went back to Samoa, and he came along. So we did a few more Survivors. More treating people. Then this was me, hard at work at the back of the ambulance, lying on a stretcher, because I became pregnant while I was over there in Samoa, and got a really bad morning sickness, and so was watching over the crew lying down. So then the next year I had my first child, so a little girl called Abby. And I went on maternity leave, but I still ran Survivor from home, so I still picked my crew. They went out there, and I Skyped pretty much 4 or 6 hours a day with them and ran it from home. And I did some more emergency exams while I was home. Why not do everything together? And so then I directed Survivor Philippines and Caramoan from home. And that was my new world. So that's my little Abby. Then we got to go back to Philippines again. And this time I took Abby with me and my husband. And we, more wilderness medicine. You learn how to relocate shoulders. That was a dislocated shoulder that I relocated in the water. You get to learn how to work in a pre-hospital environment, so not ideal conditions. More Survivor Philippines. This is just a picture of my team. So I always took 10 medics from Australia, so 3 doctors, 3 paramedics, 3 nurses, and then some local nurses and paramedics as well. So we have a big team. They're some of our local drivers as well. And we used to run a clinic from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day and then be on call. And we're basically looking after a crew of about 500. So about 200 international crew and about 300 local crew for 6 months of the year. So there's a lot of logistics with that. And looking after, they might be building at 5 different islands or land sites on a day, and sending your nurses and doctors and paramedics out to all the sites, as well as someone being on set as well. I got involved in a lot of retrieval and trauma, so we did a lot of retrievals while we were over there, especially in the Philippines. We were 10 hours from Manila, and so we had to ship out a lot of crew. After that, so what happened is, after that, at the end of Philippines, we got a Category 5 typhoon that came through. We also had a lot of dengue and malaria. We had a lot of really bad pneumonias. My little girl got really sick with a really bad pneumonia, 10 hours from any care. And I was the most senior doctor, and if she had to be intubated, I was going to be the one to intubate her. And so we had a discussion as a family about being adventurous people who love travelling and love doing medicine overseas, but that's our decision to make as an adult, and was it fair to make that decision for our children, or child at that time, and expose them to various tropical diseases and less than ideal medical conditions? So we actually came home and we decided to leave Survivor for a while, or forever, which was a sad decision to make, but it's when your life changes and different opportunities call. So I actually didn't finish my emergency medicine exams because my time clock had unfortunately run out. The college was quite excited about Survivor the first year I did it. The 6th year, not so much excited. They were like, when are you going to finally finish your exams? So they said, take a break for 3 years, think about whether you want to do emergency medicine and then come back to us. So that was a blow. And so I got into the Australian College of Rural and Remote Medicine, which actually fit me to a T. So in the College of Rural and Remote Medicine, unlike RACGP, you come out as a GP, but also with a subspecialty. So you can be a GP anaesthetist or GP obstetrician or GP emergency physician. And so that's what I opted to do. So the next 2 years I went rural to somewhere called Braidwood in southern New South Wales. I did work as a GP and an emergency physician. I did lots of fellowship exams, and I came out with a FACRM, which is a Fellowship of ACRM, as a GP and an emergency physician, and I got into care flight as well. They usually only take emergency or ICU or anaesthetics trainees, advanced trainees or specialists, but because I'd had that relationship with them all the years on Survivor, and they knew me and they knew I could do retrieval and be a sole doctor, they let me do that. So I've been doing some international retrievals with them around the South Pacific, Timor and Southeast Asia. But then I had to stop flying at 28 weeks because this happened. So I got pregnant again, and I've had a little baby boy, so that was last year. So he's 1 year old now. I turned 40 just after having him, so you can calculate, I'm 41. So now I am doing emergency medicine, I'm doing general practice, I'm working as an ACRM medical educator now, so I do all the virtual classrooms and workshops for all the rural and remote GPs around Australia in very rural, remote areas. I do rest course instructing, so that's rural emergency skills training, so that's like an APLS or an ALS for rural doctors, and I go around Australia every couple of months doing that. I'm an emergency examiner now, so having not done my ASIM fellowship, but I did my FACRM ED fellowship, so I'm an emergency examiner with them, and I'm mostly called Mummy. So at the moment I'm juggling life and family and career. It's difficult. I do work a lot of the days of the week, but my main priority is family. You have to think, what do you want to do in life, and what are your main priorities? We all have choices in our medical career. As you see, I've had lots of choices along the way, and I've chosen different pathways, probably not a linear path, but all the different choices that I've made have brought more and more opportunities along. So the future, I mean, these are some things that I'm excited about. It's World Health and refugee health, and I might get involved in that, or there might be some other opportunity that comes along. So I just want to end by saying that was a little taste of some of my journey. And I want to ask you, what shapes your choices in life on your medical career? What sort of person do you want to be? Who influences those choices? And if I can encourage you to be a passionate, compassionate, and competent doctor, don't forget to study and enjoy your journey. Thank you.
Ramona, do you want So I just want to say thanks for putting on that incredible plenary at such short notice. She saved the academic conveners' lives. Can we have another round of applause for Ramona? Some of you are already asking questions on the app, but send them through. Otherwise, you can come down to these 2 microphones just in the stairs there and ask some questions. We don't have heaps of time. We're running a little over schedule, but that's okay. No, that was wonderful. It's not your fault. So firstly, I wanted to say that convention is such a great time to see all the different things that people have done with medicine, and your story is a particularly good example of that. What would you say to someone who's looking at medicine and thinking that maybe they don't fit the traditional pathway?
Well, as you can see, there's no traditional pathway for me. I think just find out what you're passionate about, what you love to do, and what you can see yourself doing for many years. I think our society, maybe our parents or our grandparents always picked one thing and they stuck with it for 20, 25, 30, 40 years. Our society, we seem to have a lot of different opportunities and different career paths. But having said that, when you do pick medicine and do pick a career and do fellowship exams and that, it's a lot of commitment and a lot of sacrifice for you and your family. So pick something that you don't think you'll burn out in and that you love doing, because it's a huge amount of every day. And so that's what I'd say, just pick something that you love, and there's huge opportunities out there that don't fit the traditional pathway.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for that. And you were really open about juggling family life. If someone's looking, men or women looking forward into picking a career and thinking about family, anything that you would say to them?
There's never an ideal time to have children. Those of you with children will know that. Those of you without children, can I say, enjoy this time? Do everything that you can. When you have children, it doesn't limit you completely and it brings a whole nother joy and adventure. But there's some places or some things that you really just can't do unless you have supportive friends or family or partners that allow that. So if you're single, relish this singleness and do everything you can. If you have kids, you'll know the joy they bring, and it is a juggle, but you need supports. So definitely discuss things with your partner and have supports there. And if you don't have a partner, supportive friends or family that can get you through.
Awesome, thank you. We'll just go to mic 2.
Hi. Massive Survivor fan, so this is really exciting. I've actually got a couple of questions.
Sure.
So one, I noticed that they seem to be getting a lot more food as the seasons went on. And I was just wondering if you played some part in that, because I know in the first few seasons they barely had any food.
Do you remember that bit in the beginning where I said I like to help people and I love being an advocate and I am compassionate? It was killing me. So yeah, there's little things that you can do. So sometimes Jeff would come in and offer them rice versus taking their tarp. So that's a way of the survivor saying, we're not going to just supply food. It's a thing for $1 million, but that's a way of doing it. So yeah, we did look after them a little bit more than previous years.
Also, what goes into the fitness testing and the psychological and physical kind of well-being of the contestants? And I'll get my third question as well. What goes into deciding when the contestants have to go home? Because I know Australian Outback, Michael had to go home when he burned himself.
He's a real fan.
I'm not lying, I'm a big fan.
You're obviously a massive fan. The first part of it, what goes into their fitness and training, it's absolutely whatever they want to do. So someone could do absolutely nothing, someone could do a whole lot. We do meet them months before they come on the show in LA, so we go and do casting. So I used to go there for a couple of months, and they get psychological as well as medical fitness tests and bloods and all that sort of thing to see that they're okay for the show. So medically, that was my part. Psychologically, you can see a few slip through the cracks. But no, that's the producer's decision, because they obviously want people that are a little bit labile and a little bit contentious and a little bit... If they were all really nice and lovely and everything, it wouldn't make for drama. So that's that side of things. In terms of how you decide that they're coming off, that's a big decision. I mean, it's not made lightly, obviously, because it's $1 million at stake. The contestant gets to say whether they want to stay or not, unless it's an emergency and we're going to save their life. And then it's a discussion between the producers and the doctors on what's ethically and morally acceptable.
Okay, we just have time for one more question that came through the app. There's a lot of people in the room who've studied medicine and might be looking at creating a business in the future. Do you have any advice for them starting from a medical background?
Yeah, I think basically if you're thinking of starting a company or whatever, look at a niche. So in expedition and wilderness medicine in Australia, it's quite a niche. There's not very many companies doing it. TV and movie medics, they often get nurses or paramedics, not so much doctors unless they're going far. If you're thinking of any sort of business, so not TV and entertainment industry, but get, as you said, so I did like 2 years of research, and then every single year I was on, I did more research and more study to make my company better. So I think you have to do a lot of research. Business management's always good, but a degree doesn't necessarily help you in that specific situation. So learn about your specific situation and what will help you, and use people you know, not use them. Question people you know and use their advice and be wise about it.
Well, thank you again, Ramona. That was an absolutely excellent session. Let's give her a round of applause. Thank you. I'll just give you this one.
Thank you. I'm going to hug you.
Thanks very much, everybody.